Welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. So we're talking about humanitarian horizon, bridging careers. My name is Nancy Prévost-Maurice. I'm with Royal Roads University, and I'll tell you more in a few moments, but I'm so grateful you're taking some time in your busy schedule to join us today. And we have 5 panelists for you. Very excited. Very excited to be here. Very exciting times for us on this Thursday morning here in British Columbia. So before we get started, I always like to acknowledge the traditional lands that we're on. So we can all take just a quick moment to ground our feet on the floor and just reflect on the ancestral land that our journey is from today. So I am on the Lekwungen speaking people, traditional lands, unceded lands, also known as the Esquimalt and Songhe nations and families. So at Royal Road, it's with deep gratitude that we work, learn, love, play, here, where the past, present, and future of Indigenous and non-Indigenous people come together. If you know which land you're joining us from today, please enter it in the chat. And here's a quick agenda for us. I see more people joining us. Wonderful. Thank you for being here. That's fantastic. Quick agenda. So student, as I mentioned, if you can click on your name and just the little 3 dots and rename yourself with the program that you're in. I know even some people reach out to me. They're not even at Royal Roads yet. They're a prospect and they want to be here. In that case, you don't have to. But really, student, if you have, we have so many programs today that can be global leadership, climate action, disaster emergency. You know who you are. So if you can just add it in parentheses, that gives us a great understanding of who is in the room. And it's a bit easier for employers, organizations to mention what they know about your programs or about what you need to know today. I'll do a little brief intro about why we're here today, why we gathered today for 60 minutes. We'll have a presentation with our 5 panelists. We'll answer any question you might have, and hopefully we have a few minutes, for networking. And here, why are we joining today? I'll see if I can change that slide. So I am working for the Career Innovation Project, and I just want to give a quick overview because that set the tone for today. So really, we're trying to bring more work-integrated learning initiative to Royal Roads, and the goal is also to support Canada's transition to a net zero economy. That's a mouthful, I know. So it's really about talking about climate action, sustainability, social justice, and I think most of you are in programs that we talk about it. So it's more than talking about it, it's what do we actually do to change what we do in our day-to-day life at work, maybe at home, in different projects. And I added a stat here for the Assembly of First Nations because that really stood out for me. The climate crisis constitutes a state of emergency for our lands, waters, animals, and people. So I think as we discussed today about all the amazing work that our panelists are doing and the work that you're doing as well as students and as people will graduate soon. So that's very good to understand and always reflect on like our place in this big ecosystem. And we have Alejandra here, very grateful for my colleague Alejandra to be here. She's a career advisor. So she has worked with many of you one-on-one, and now we're bringing kind of more people into the conversation. And I wrote Connection Matter because that's what I love about my role right now is creating those connections between student and industry. So I hope that gives you a quick overview. And here, that's something that the career advisor use. And I just want to say, good job. Kudos to you, student, for showing up today. You're in the middle there, attending events. So you're building your career, you're building your relationship, you're building your network. So good for you for being here and taking the time to create those meaningful conversations. So panelists for us today, we have Christina from the BC Association of Emergency Managers. We have Patrick from the Canadian Red Cross. We have Laura from the City of Victoria Climate Action Program. We have Nathaniel from Kinvest Impact Foundation and Mercy Ship Canada. And I think without further ado, I'll just ask all of you to introduce yourself. I'm giving you about 5 minutes to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, maybe a little bit about your career story. I know many of you have transition roles, anything that you find that in 5 minutes will be interesting and helpful for students here. So I don't know, if, Christina, would you like to go first?
Sure, sounds great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Christina Carberry. I am from on the lands of the unceded lands of the Ktunaxa peoples today, and I'm grateful to be here. I am a recent MADAM grad, the Masters of Emergency and Disaster Management, graduated in 2019. Yeah, I'll just do a really quick overview, I guess, of how I got here. I worked in public safety for about the last 16 years or so. I started in Vancouver as a 911 dispatcher, spent some time as a fire dispatcher, a bit of time with BC Wildfire as well. And then in 2017, I enrolled in the MADAM program, completed that, and shortly thereafter transitioned into the world of emergency management. It's been a really interesting transition. It's been great. Recently on the board of directors for the BC Association of Emergency Managers. One of the great things about being on the board of directors for BC AEM is that we get to connect with people and build relationships all the time. We really, focus on advocacy, sort of facilitation, change support. We're looking at things like the recent legislation updates from the Emergency Program Act to the new EDMA legislation, or Emergency and Disaster Management Act. And then just the promotion of wise practices. Advocacy is a really big piece for us. There's so much change. There's so many different facets to the field of emergency management. Many people look at it as just local government and provincial government and whatnot, but there's just so many different interconnected relationships and private-public partnerships. There's a lot of opportunities there. My current day job, I'm the Protective Services Manager for the Regional District of East Kootenay. So we're in the southeast corner of the province. I'm based in Cranbrook, BC now, and I'm part of the senior management team for the organization. Regional districts, in case anyone's not aware, are a local authority, local government, and they're quite unique from municipalities. We have a lot more limitations. I won't go too far into the details on this because it's not that interesting for this conversation. But we have a lot of stricter budgetary limitations and whatnot. My role oversees 8 rural fire departments, as well as our 911 service. And then I also oversee our regional emergency management program, which, if you are familiar with the new legislation at all, the province is pushing for multi-jurisdictional emergency management organizations, which is essentially what our regional program is. We've had this for roughly 20 years now. It's been extremely successful in our region, and we support our 6 electoral areas, 8 municipalities, and 4 First Nations. So anytime there's some sort of emergency, or if we're doing some planning, we do a lot of regional planning. We work together. We have really strong relationships with the municipalities and the First Nations. We saw some really good strengths from that come out of last wildfire season last summer. We had some really unfortunate losses of some homes lost in one of our local First Nations, and we're able to work really closely together and even strengthen our relationships through those really trying times. And it's been a really rewarding position to be in. I will kind of wrap my summary up about there, I think, but happy to answer any questions throughout today.
Thank you so much, Christina. Welcome to some new students joining us. If you can rename yourself with the program in parentheses, that's wonderful. Catherine, may I pass it over to you?
Of course, thank you. So I'm Catherine Tremblay. I'm located in Lévis, Quebec, so across the country from you, but I work for Emergency Canada and our offices are located in Victoria. So I'm speaking from traditional territory of Huron-Wendat, so First Nations over here. So I always feel a little bit strange talking about my career, just because I feel it's all over the place, but there is a common thread in my life about always being engaged in volunteer work and really building on collective strength of serving a cause. So I've touched study and grow in multiple fields, music, theology, graphic design, social economy, and management. So that's why I say I feel sometimes it's a little bit all over the place, but it's led me today here. Part of my journey has led me through social economy, discovered social economy, and started up a nonprofit cafe 15 years ago that I worked in for 12 years, and now sitting on the board of directors and still serving in that way. In 2021, I was looking into transitioning to a different professional challenge, and having 3 kids, it's a little bit different also. So I discovered Mercy Ships Canada, especially. So I work with Mercy Ships Canada. Our role with Mercy Ships is really serving communities in West Africa. So we do direct surgical cares and training for healthcare professionals. We are part of 16 national offices who work collaboratively with Mercy Ships International to staff our ships with volunteers and train healthcare professionals in the host nations. The idea is to really strengthen their surgical ecosystem beyond the time of our presence, but also bring healing and hope for patients that needs to have a health restored, dignity restored, and gain a chance to a brighter future. So that's, in a nutshell, a little bit of my own journey. My work with Mercy Ships Canada is about mainly representing Mercy Ships Canada in the French-speaking Canada. So you can notice my accent potentially today. Work with Canadians who want to volunteer on board our ships, but also develop any kind of partnership with organization or individuals who wants to join our mission. So donors, volunteers, and partners of all kind. So that's me. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful, Catherine. I can't believe the cafe is already 15 years ago. I recall when you started it. Wow. And that's something for the people online as well. We never know those connections we make throughout the career. And I'm sure many of us can relate to that. People you meet 20 years ago that come back into your life and in your career journey. And it's so wonderful to reconnect. Laura, would you like to go next?
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Barrett, and I am the manager of energy and climate action at the City of Victoria. And I've been with the city now for about 4 years, but I originally started my career as a mechanical engineer, and I've got about 15 years experience working in climate and sustainability, starting from that place. Originally, I was working in green buildings kind of sector, providing guidance and expertise on sort of lead designation for buildings out in Calgary. And then I made a career move across the country over to Toronto to head up energy and sustainability for a large healthcare organization, sort of a big hospital campus with 20 odd buildings, and sort of managing their energy and sustainability portfolios there before I made another move back across the country this way in Victoria now to kind of head the climate action program for the city. We have a awesome team at the City of Victoria of about 10 staff working on advancing different climate initiatives. So as the city's challenges sort of pertain to, where energy and fossil fuels are being burned within the community, that tends to be focused on key areas like transformation in sort of the building sector, where my background was very useful to come to this position, but also the transportation sector, as well as a big piece of the work that we're doing lately is around sort of adaptation of infrastructure to prepare for the impacts of the changing climate. So sort of on 3 different fronts, lots of programs to support the community. The local government role is kind of interesting because obviously a lot of these transformations that need to happen to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and transform to renewable energies are not all within the control, of the municipality itself. So there's a lot of different players from the residents to the businesses in the community, and a lot of our program is sort of working to build relationships and support community as as we all need to kind of make these transformations. A little bit about me. I love the outdoors. I do a lot of hiking. Obviously, Victoria was a big draw for me to move out this way. I have 2 young daughters. I am a EV owner and an advocate for electric vehicles. My family and I drove our electric vehicle across the country back in 2019 with our 2 young kids when we moved out here. So that was a really exciting adventure and really helped to be able to share those stories with folks that are interested in electric vehicles. And yeah, I'm just really happy to have the pleasure to manage such an awesome team at the city working on these intersectional challenges.
Yeah, thank you so much. Oh, I'm glad to see that this team is growing and growing. You get more folks involved. Yeah, that's so important. Thank you, Laura. Patrick, would you like to go next?
Thank you, Nancy. Hi, everyone. My name is Pat Quealy. I am joining you from the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people here in Ottawa, but I actually work and live in Coast Salish territory at the confluence of the Senchothan and Lekwungen speaking peoples. And I live just up the road from Royal Roads in Metchosin in the traditional territory of Chanu First Nation. So very grateful to join my esteemed panelists to have a chat with you and equally learn from you as students. I'll just offer right now, if I say anything to remember, I would be grateful to connect with all of you on LinkedIn and further a conversation one-on-one if that would be beneficial to you, and we'd love to chat. A little bit about my journey. I think I'm Nancy's example of someone who transitioned quite a bit. My journey in the humanitarian field started quite a long time ago. My first career was in the military. I served for about 25 years there. And I would say it was in the early 90s, working in Yugoslavia, supporting UN humanitarian convoy missions into and out of Sarajevo. Fast forward through all of that, served in Afghanistan, work alongside the International Committee of the Red Cross there, and also had the privilege of serving in 2003 as a reinforcing group of soldiers to the wildfire situation in the interior in both Kelowna and BHER. So for me, the journey to a humanitarian mission kind of has that foundation, but just love so much the ability to work directly and locally, and listening to colleagues how important that is, and inspiring to work with Canadians. So over time, I then transitioned. My last job in the military was responsible for emergency planning and operations on the west coast of Canada. Did a number of operations there, and then transitioned to provincial government. I worked with Emergency Management BC as their assistant deputy minister, and then eventually transitioned to a role as chief executive officer for the Royal Canadian Marine Search and Rescue. So volunteer-based organization that supports the Coast Guard mission of life-saving in about 33 different stations up and down the coast of BC. And then gratefully volunteered with the Red Cross for about 4 years before transitioning to be my current role, which is Vice President for BC and Yukon and Regional Vice President for the West of Canada. So all that said, really what rings true for me is just the sense of service and, listening to colleagues and thinking of your programs and how important it is to understand who we serve and why we serve, and how important it is, as Nancy said, to feel that connectedness to our ecosystem, our humanity, the people and the energy in the earth that we are part of. And to find that sense of connectedness in our work is a focus for me. A little bit about the Red Cross as an organization. In BC, we focus on a number of different supports to colleagues like Christina and her team in RDK, to the provincial and federal governments, working directly in support and alongside of Indigenous leadership. And then more broadly, I would say we focus in two main areas: emergencies and health. And at the confluence, of course, is health and emergencies. So a lot of experience recently with the pandemic. In terms of an international movement, we are one federation, or pardon me, one national society in an international federation of 191 different national societies that we collaborate with and learn from. And the third element of our movement is the International Committee of the Red Cross, who are stewards of the Geneva Conventions and will work in conflict zones, as we see in many places across the world. So very grateful to be joining you all here and join the conversation.
Thank you, Pat. Yeah, I'm trying to find the image that our career advisor often share of a career that is like all over the place. And I feel that this is why I love when people introduce themselves and say where they're coming from, because it's very rare that it's linear, that we're like, oh, I started here and here I go. It's a bit all over the place. And it gives our student a good understanding too of like which organization you already know. And if they need any introduction, that's often very useful as well. So thank you for that, Pat. And Nathaniel, would you like to go?
Thank you very much. It's a bit intimidating going after everybody, but I'll do my best. So my name is Nat Hollins. I guess I'm coming from an international humanitarian perspective. I'm from Quebec. And so it was in 2010, I had graduated from university. I studied English literature because I wanted to be a teacher. And so talking about the connection. So I studied English literature, and then I was teaching in a school here in Sherbrooke. And then the Haiti earthquake in January 2010 hit. And I said, I have to go out and do something. I just have to. And I was lucky to have a great principal who said, hey, you want to go do something? Go ahead. I was able to raise a bit of money for my local church, a team of 5 people. And sorry, Pat, I made a fake Red Cross badge. And I had to get into the country. And I used that fake Red Cross badge to get into the airport at Port-au-Prince, where tons of medical teams from the US had been arriving, and they couldn't speak a lick of French or Creole. And so it was the ability to speak French that got me into humanitarian. And once I was able to speak French, I got sent to Chad, Eastern Chad, to Central African Republic, to DR Congo, just on a humanitarian journey for about 7 years. Always working at the beginning of the crisis as part of the initial rapid response team. And my role was to set up the whole emergency base so that eventually when the doctors and the engineers arrived, they would get picked up at the airport. But when I landed, nobody was there. You had a backpack with a bit of money in it. But I think what was so powerful about that is you really saw how amazing localization and the local population is part of the humanitarian response. When you arrive, you are the weakest. Yeah, you got money in your backpack, but you got no networks, you got no trust, you got no local knowledge. And for me, that was transformational. And so in 2017, I made a big change in my life. And so another pivot like everybody else. And going from humanitarian, I said, I felt like a lifeguard on a river. And every single day you're pulling people out of the river. You're like, there's got to be something we could do up the river, maybe build a bridge so we don't face this problem all the time. And that's when I switched into social enterprise. And so I founded Kinvest Impact Foundation, co-founded with a team of kind of mix of local, American, Canadian, Rwandan, Congolese, but really from a broad range of people, some humanitarians, some entrepreneurs. And we all started with this one question: how do we accelerate the development of rural Africa? So cities across Africa have been developing very, very well. Capital cities look great. You go to Kigali in Rwanda, and it's cleaner than Montreal and Calgary. Not Victoria, but but as soon as you get out into the rural communities, and this is true around the world, there has been a systemic underinvestment in these areas. And yet these are the most impoverished areas that are most at risk of climate change and all sorts of other issues, right? Talk about the pandemic. Those who lived through the pandemic while being extremely poor came out with much worse outcomes than those who lived through the pandemic while being extremely rich. So it wasn't just a health emergency. It's a complex lives and livelihoods. And I think that's what I learned. And so I said, look, as a humanitarian, I want to be a social entrepreneur. So I started a cafe. Catherine inspired me a little bit. I have known Catherine. We grew up in the same small town in northern Quebec. So I started a cafe and ran that for 4 years and really got to work with an amazing locals team. It became profitable, self-sustaining, locally managed. Then the pandemic actually destroyed it. Tourism ended. So at that time, I saw how the pandemic and the underlying systemic roots of poverty were causing like multiplying negative humanitarian crises in rural communities. And so, as I said, Kinvest Impact Foundation was founded in 2020. So we're accelerating rural economic development. And the second question, though, is how do we make it sustainable? Right? Humanitarian, how do we fund all of our initiatives? And funding disaster relief is expensive, much more expensive than preventing it. And so those are the two questions that really got us started. And so Kinvest Impact Foundation works on identifying these systemic barriers to economic development. We identify market innovations in renewable energy, in e-mobility. So Laura, I'm with you on the electric vehicle side. This year, we converted our first electric vehicle from an existing platform that was gas powered, and we converted it to electric. So we're really all about accelerating economic development in rural communities. So anyways, I could talk a lot about it, but if I could kind of summarize it is, there's a huge humanitarian needs. Local people are the most powerful way of getting out there. And I think once you leverage kind of your passion for humanitarianism or your passion for helping others, as well with your own internal kind of skill set and the skill sets of those that you're serving, you can do amazing things and overcome some of the worst disasters that I've seen. So yeah, even if you make a fake Red Cross badge and study English Lit, you can make it.
Thank you so much, Nat. And I think there's a question for you in the chat if you want to look at it. But yeah, very inspiring Pat here. I'll just post in the chat here some question I prep in advance, but of course, this session is for you students. So if there's any burning question you have, you put them in the chat and we'll get back to them. And I think, yeah, Nathaniel, what I wanted to add is I had the chance to take a course last fall with the Global Leadership Program, and I see many folks are here. And I'm glad because you're saying the same thing that the instructor were saying back then. It's like work with the local population and learn from them and collaborate. So I'm glad that you're seeing the same thing from the ground. So that's wonderful. Yeah, I posted some questions here and you can go. I don't know if you just want to jump on those questions. Of course, because we're doing those events to build career skills, networking, really to give tools to our students to get an internship, as we mentioned, maybe in May, or a better career or a change of career as they graduate railroad. So what skill the student need to work in your field? So that can be 1, 2, 3, and maybe we'll see some common trend. And we can do, I like the popcorn style if you just want to jump in.
I can jump in. I don't mind. So we're talking about skills that, yeah, I think from what we see in our context, being a small nonprofit, like Mercerships Canada, even Mercerships International is, medium size. It's not a big thing, but just learning about the ecosystem of NGOs, understanding philanthropy, charity world, how financing works, and that has been really important. And another thing that I like to say, other than skills that you might have heard, but to build a healthy practice of self-care, I feel like, especially in those fields, you see needs all the time, and there's always a project to be done and always something else. But if you don't build time today, and be responsible not to burn out, I feel like that's dangerous. So that's just something I want to put out there, because I see it from a lot of our volunteers who go and they have great skills and they're ready to go and serve, and but they don't build that into their practice. So that's just something I wanted to put out there today.
I'll jump on that. I agree with Catherine completely. I mean, clearly there are skills intrinsically from your studies, and there will be different skills to adapt based on how you apply them. So being expert in the field is aspirational, but always be learning. And I think going back to something that Nat said, recognizing in this environment, this vocation of service, we are serving people and wanting to focus on the strengths of those communities, and recognize that in many cases, despite how long we want to have a relationship and be engaged and support, oftentimes we are not going to be there forever. So our duty, our responsibility is to understand and be humble as we walk in alongside leadership, that we are there to learn as much as to share, and obviously to listen first. So that approach, and coupling with, as Catherine said, it's a long journey, and we will make mistakes, and we need to take our licks, so to speak, when things don't go precisely as we had hoped, or the intentions don't necessarily always match up to the outcomes. So to be determined, remain resilient personally, professionally, understand that there's always space to improve, and that for me helps you carry on through, a long time frame, a long lens, and to truly make it a career. To my mind, as Catherine said, you need to look after yourself and give yourself space to heal and to grow, and don't forget your families. That support will always be critical to me, in the sense that this is a vocation of service, absolutely, but that your family is there for you forever, and to not let that get lost in the expansion of of energy and good intention.
I was going to say opportunistic. I think crises happen quick, and it's those that are there that can kind of help. And so it doesn't have to be a negative thing like opportunistic, but it's actually just it's looking at the opportunities that are around you, and you need to have that willingness, right? To kind of, this rapid response is, they hear the ring of the bell and they get in the car, they just go wherever the need is. And so there's a certain impulse that's just like, I hear, I get up, I go, and then I'll figure out as I go. At least personally, that's what's been most successful for me. If you plan too far from the back end, I've always had more difficulty.
I think building on that, you can apply that sort of more broadly, not necessarily just to, disasters or whatnot, but as projects or different things come across your plate, sort of being opportunistic and thinking about how those skills that you might build from that could, take your career down, a sideways step or a parallel different path, that might not always be kind of what you were initially sort of thinking in terms of climbing the ladder, so to speak. I think in climate action, especially, and especially in the municipal level, there's obviously a diverse set of skills, that would be useful for working in that area, because climate sort of touches across, all aspects of the organization. But what I tend to see is that people that can sort of differentiate themselves by offering sort of skills at that sort of intersection of different areas. And so if you have skill sets in climate, but also in comms and engagement, you're kind of that unicorn person that can do both of those things and bring that specialty into that area. Similarly, like climate and economics, or if you were, bringing climate and engineering together. So finding that sort of niche intersection could really build a really powerful sort of set of skills that would be unique to yourself.
Yeah, I think that multi-sectoral piece is really key. In our local authority here, our emergency program is working quite closely with our planning department. Our planning department was leading sort of our climate change planning pieces, but there's so many layers that kind of intersect with ours, wildfire resiliency and ensuring when there's developers applying to develop different areas, that they're following, fire smarting processes and guidelines and whatnot, and just really kind of taking into consideration the hazard impacts, and trying to not build in areas where there are hazards that haven't been mitigated. That's a really big one. Slight segue on this one, but critical thinking in emergency management for us is super important. There's so much information that we're overloaded with today, whether it's through social media when there's something happening, like during I guess it's mostly specific to the response period. But there's information coming at us from a million different directions, and being able to really navigate what is actually valid information when you're having to make decisions that impact people, and you have to really think about the sort of cascading impacts and the different social vulnerabilities and how different groups are impacted when you make your various decisions. It's just, you really need to think those pieces through. And then relationship building, which has been touched on here, whether it's with the communities themselves, whether it's with businesses or other organizations and agencies. Relationship building is such an important piece of humanitarianism in general, not just in emergency management. It's such an interconnected field. There's people that I talk to on a daily basis that I never would have thought I would cross paths with. But they all play a role, and we all work together, and that's what makes us all stronger.
One quick thing, speaking more than one language. It sounds maybe silly sometimes, and it's not just an English, French, Canada thing, but you speak other language, it becomes a door, a bridge into certain areas that need help, building trust and everything. So if you speak other languages, leverage that. It's hugely helpful.
Love that. Thank you. Yeah, and I feel that I think many international students are here, and me too, being a French Canadian in an English province, sometimes we want to fit in and we want to just think about English, but that's so cool that you mentioned that many languages can be quite a skill, and not to be shy to mention it. And Christina, I see in the chat too, and it's related to skills. How did you navigate the transition from frontline operational role to the high level regional leadership? So
Yeah.
kind of, how did you build that leadership skills or those?
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually just typing in the chat there, but I'll answer it here. It's probably easier. So a big part of it was actually my internship. When I was a fire dispatcher for Kamloops Fire Rescue in Kamloops, and when I was doing my maiden program, and so I was able to do a internship with the city of Kamloops, doing a hazard risk vulnerability analysis with their EPC, and that was actually gave me a really good basis for kind of understanding how local governments approach hazards and what that looks like. So when I relocated down to the southeast to Cranbrook here, I reached out to the regional district. I saw there was a kind of a regional program, and that did a lot more than just the individual municipalities. And so I kind of just reached out and introduced myself. And in case you're not aware, EMCR, the ministry EMCR, they do a lot of funding for training courses, a lot of JI courses and whatnot. And I use that as an opportunity to network. So most local authorities will offer those training programs, and they typically share them in-house with their staff and then with some of their partner agencies. But they do share it with people who are volunteers or just have made themselves known to them in the community. And so I was able to actually kind of get my foot in the door there and at least get my name out there and just kind of meet some people and sort of start building those relationships from there. And I got lucky. Someone went off on a bit of a leave, and I was able to step in temporarily, and it just kind of grew from there. I was also super fortunate. One of the manager at the time, that was my position currently, she is a former MADAM grad. I don't think it was actually called the MADAM program at the time. It was back in, I think, 2010. It was sort of the first iteration of it. And she was a fantastic mentor for me. And so as I kind of progressed into the regional district here and ended up taking a permanent position as an emergency program coordinator, she really kind of walked me through what that looked like. And then she actually ended up taking a leave herself. So I was able to step into that as in an acting capacity. And then eventually it turned permanent. So really, yeah, relationships, introduce yourself, do the uncomfortable things. And if you can find a mentor is amazing. that can be really helpful, even if you're not working directly with them. If you're able to have that connection and kind of get that advice from people, it's really helpful.
Love
Can I
that.
add
Thank you.
just a
Yeah,
second
please.
on the mentoring? Because you were talking, Christina, and I was thinking how many great mentors I had in my journey building a social enterprise, the cafe. And that was so instrumental in having feedback. And even today, there have always been people that have been able to give me sound feedback on something sometimes I didn't feel I could see. And I just asking for like, what do you see that I don't see? I need your help, you know? So I think just finding people and asking, like, even if they're not officially a mentor, you can ask someone that you look up to and be like, I just want to be in contact twice a year. It doesn't have to be like a regular thing every week, but just reaching out to people and asking for mentoring is so important.
Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, such a rich conversation. And I think I'll jump into the question, what are the best pieces of career advice or one advice, many advice you got in your career? You kind of touched on it a little bit, but if you want to go there, and a few students are asking me if they'll have the opportunity to meet with you. So I think I'll make sure to keep the 5-10 last minute in breakout rooms so students can kind of do a bit one-on-one. Lovely, people are willing, love it in the chat. Thank you, students. But yeah, maybe a piece of advice. We just mentioned mentorship. I think that's a very important one. Anything else?
I'll jump in really quick there. I just had a couple really quick ones. Don't be afraid to be the quietest person in the room. I know a lot of people want to make their mark and they want to be seen when you're that you're doing something, but being the quietest person in the room, it gives you the opportunity to really learn, to really understand what the challenges are and not actually make assumptions, which is my second point, is to not make assumptions and go into meetings or whatever your project you're working on and be curious. I had an interesting learning recently, less so for me, more for some of the others that were at the table. We did a recent after action for an event that we responded to last year. And it was some good learning for the province. But when it comes to working with First Nations partners, there's so many positions out there that are specific Indigenous liaisons for various things. And it's not to say that those roles aren't important and they don't have a place, but there's often an assumption that that's who the First Nation community should be dealing with. And often that actually slows down progress, that slows down response or recovery or whatever it happens to be. So it's just making sure you're really listening to the community, asking what they need, and ensuring that that's actually what is needed, because it may not be. And in this case, it wasn't. And it was a bit of a hindrance. So just being really aware that is not a one size fits all, regardless of what situation you're working on, and making sure that the needs of the community are your priority.
I think one of the things I'd say, I learned it from my mom. So I did partly homeschool, and when my mom couldn't stand me anymore, she'd find somebody in town that like ran a local mechanic shop, and then she'd send me over there and she'd say, do you want to go? I have like a 14-year-old who will clean your shop out, but then teach him a bit of mechanics. And so I'd go and I'd learn a bit of mechanics, and then I'd go and I was like, oh, I have somebody who can clean your construction site. Can you teach them how to build a house? And so then when I got to university, my car broke down. I'm like, oh, I should go and become valuable to somebody, right? And find how can I be valuable to somebody first, and then find a good exchange in that, right? Then give me a job. And so when I wanted to become a humanitarian, my first trip, I went for this 3 months to Haiti. And when I came back, nobody would hire me. I was a teacher, high school with an English degree. Nobody wanted to hire me. So I started calling people, interviewing them and saying, hey, what are some of your biggest problems? What is your program all about? And then I would create fake JDs to address that problem. And I would apply for the job. And I got in. And so somebody called me back and said, yeah, we have that problem. Thanks for solving it. Can you come to Port-au-Prince in 2 months? And that's how I got in. So the idea of like, find out how you can be valuable to an organization or to a company or to a community or to a team first, right? Out of service. And I like what Pat said, you're here to serve, right? And once you're there, then you negotiate a fair fare. Like, hey, can you teach me how to build a house? Or can you right? So that's what I would say. Just come out and try to be valuable to somebody, and find a good exchange. And
yeah, and on a similar line, so Nat, we have a connection you're not aware of, and some of the best advice I received was from an English teacher who was my dad, uh, very early on. And I don't know precisely the words because I probably wasn't listening closely enough, but what sticks in my heart today was that his message was the most fulfilling work you'll do will be work that helps others. And as we're having this conversation about humanitarianism, to me, that advice translates to remembering that this is all about human interaction. This is about people. We're in the people business. So you never will get away from that. And if you keep that at the center of your work, I find, you can always learn the procedures, the skills, the process, and critical thinking, as Christina mentioned, I think is key to being successful. But I come back to what's at the heart of it. And most recently, the best advice I received was today. I'm coming from the Assembly of First Nations Emergency Management Forum here in Ottawa, and it was Grand Chief Gerald Antoine who spoke and closed the proceedings. I'm paraphrasing. I didn't write good notes, but it boils down to something like this. Again, reflecting on relationships, he said, action is meaningful only in a relationship. Understanding of relationships is infinitely more important than the search for achieving action itself. And so with that in mind, for me, that's where the meaning and the resonance, the long-standing value of our contributions will be, is in that respect for the relationships, in that we're all humans and we're all connected.
Okay, I'll follow up with that. That's great, though. It's hard to. I think it's literally in line with what you're saying. I think my parents have always welcomed a whole lot of people in our house. Sometimes it was really random, and looking back as an adult, I'm like, wow, that was weird. Like, we had people coming and live with us. We had people from all over the place, but meeting people for who they are, and let yourself be transformed by those relationships and building those relationships. When we come forward, meeting people, thinking that we are bringing the solution, we are going to show you something, and not in a teachable posture of, I might learn something new today. And even in my context of working in the cafe, that's a biggest part of my professional journey. So that's often where I go back. But just sitting down with a volunteer who, by the first look, I wouldn't think I would, learn something, but being so humbled and be like, oh my goodness, I've never realized that could be her life, and understanding a better perspective of that's, her journey and how it's impacted my own empathy towards others, and my own, my own journey in meeting others. So that's been really important in my whole journey. And still today, when I have 3 young kids, and I'm always telling myself they can teach me so much, even if they're so young. I think we need to stay in that posture of learning for whoever comes through our door.
I'll just add, one other thing really quick, sort of in addition to building relationships. I think that's been a big key theme across everyone here, but also identify communication skills in general, and advocacy skills in the climate action space. A lot of times we're looking at sort of change management, helping organizations, helping people sort of process change and understand sort of transformations, and being able to communicate complex issues really succinctly, being able to advocate for the projects that you want to see, and stick up for the progress that you want to see within the organization, is hugely beneficial to be able to do that successfully.
I think we got everyone for that last question. Thank you so much. Wow, I can't believe we have been chatting for 50 minutes, and I'm like, oh, running out of time. I can stay here all afternoon, but I think for now I'll stop the recording just to open breakout rooms and let students network a little bit. going from one room to the other one for a few minutes. But yeah, huge thank you to all of you. It's so inspiring. Like I'm very grateful that I'm sharing this space with you all. I'll stop this.